With these two problems, you should go ahead and try to work these out before you watch the video, since they're similar to the last two. On the first one here, we'd want to go ahead and factor out the top, factor out the bottom. Which one has more x's, the top or the bottom? And we could simplify that. We get an x on the top. Look at the y minus 3, the 3 minus y. We can cross those out and put a negative 1. So we'd have that x on top times that negative 1 gives us negative x. Multiplying these here. Multiply the tops, multiply the bottoms. By the way, 10 is the 5 times the 2. The 6 is the 2 times the 3. Start crossing out. You can cross out the 3's. You can cross out the 5's, and so on. And you just start crossing everything out and look at what's left. And in this case, we are left with a 2 and a 2 on top, which gives us 4. We're left this x cubed on top, and we're left with a y to the first on top, and we're left with the z on the bottom. Now, when we're dealing with division, we don't normally go ahead and divide, because instead of dividing, we multiply by the reciprocal. Because if you think of 10 divided by 2, that's 5. But 10 times a half is also 5. And dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal of 1/2. So instead of dividing by this fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, which means we flip it upside down. Then it's just like the last problems. Everything's multiplication and division, so we multiply all the top, multiply the bottom, and start crossing stuff out. Got a 3 top and bottom, we can cross those out. We got 5's top and bottom, cross those out. Let's see which one has more x's. The top has one more compared to the bottom. Look at the y's. Well, y to the first over y to the first, they're going to drop. Which one has more a's? Top has one more a. Look at the b's. The top has 2 more b's. And then you look at what's left, and you have on top an x, an a to the first, and a b squared. On the bottom, you have your 8 squared, and or not 8 squared, sorry, 2 squared, and a 2, which gives you 8 on the bottom. On the right-hand side, you're going to do the same idea. You always keep the first fraction the same and multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. Now, not everything is multiplication and division like it was over here, so we have to factor first. Well, there's nothing to do with that first one. It doesn't factor. Top right one, though, that's differences of squares, so we can factor that into a y plus 1, not a y, 1 plus k and a 1 minus k. On the bottom, we can also factor that. That factors into a k minus 1 and a k minus 3. Now that we have some things that are the same top and bottom, we can start crossing stuff out. We have our k plus 1's. We have a k minus 3, k minus 3. Oh, yeah. And what goes on when these two things are pretty much the same, but they're switched around the minus sign? Well, we can cross those out and put a minus 1. So in other words, everything dropped out except for that minus 1. So your answer is just plain old -1. Well, 2 more problems. You might be able to do this first one on your own before you watch the video. You might not. Now, we have a big fraction bar here. Remember that big fraction bar just means division. So we're going to take what's on top divided by what's underneath. But remember, instead of dividing by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. So now it's just like problems that we've done before. So we want to go ahead and factor. Well, the first top doesn't factor, first numerator. Second numerator does not factor. The last denominator does not factor, but the first denominator over here does factor. That's differences of squares. So we have the top, differences of squares from that lower left denominator, and we still have our x cubed. We now have a 2y minus 3x, and that's similar to this here, but remember they're not the same, but they're just switched around the minus sign. So they're going to cross out and give us a -1. And then you can ask yourself which one has more x's, the top or the bottom. And in this case, the bottom has more x's, one more x, so it leaves us then with the x gone on the top, just a -1, an x to the first and the bottom in our first parenthesis, and that's what we have right there. The last problem here, upper right, we're not dividing, so we don't have to do any multiplying by the reciprocal, so we'll just leave that the same, but we want to go ahead and factor that. So we have our first fraction, factor the top into a y plus 2 and a y plus 3, factor the bottom, differences of squares, start crossing stuff out. You have your x plus 2's top and bottom, you have your x plus 3's, you have your x minus 3's, everything drops out, leaves you with 1.